So basically, I've been interviewed a couple of times, and I find it quite interesting chatting to people who are of a similar opinion and have a similar desire to want to help children. So I thought it'd be interesting, having seen you speak, I think it was the back end of 2019, and listening to your story. It was amazing, the way you delivered it, the whole thing, everything about it. It was so emotional, and I was just so inspired by you. And so I thought, what a lovely thing to sit and have a cup of tea and talk about your story and what you do, and what started it, if that's okay. I don't want to.
Yeah. No, it sounds really good. And, thank you so much for your lovely feedback. I mean, my husband died 12 and a half years ago now, really suddenly when he was 34. And, like you say, I still get utterly emotional, especially for the kids, because my kids were 3 and 11 months when Martin had a heart attack. And I found out very quickly that there was very little support for bereaved children, full stop, but even less for very, very young bereaved children. And I started to try and change that. So yeah, that's how that started.
Yeah, it's funny, a lot of people who have entered our world of trying to help children all seem to have their own story that got them there. So for me, I was 11 when my brother died, and I mean that was 30 years ago now. So it was a very, very different world back then, but there was nothing. We had his funeral on Christmas Eve, and I had the Christmas break from school, and I was straight back in January, and that was it. And it's affected me, and I think if I'd have had some help back then, things would have obviously been very different. And so anything that we can do to help, particularly with your book, for the very littlies. I have got a copy, but I tried to find it this morning and I don't know where it is. I've got your new one.
Yay!
But I can't seem to find my copy of Is Daddy Coming Back in a Minute. So I do apologise, but I see you've got them around.
Yes.
Because your son helped you with it, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he was very little. He was only 3 at the time, so he didn't, it wasn't like we sat down, we wrote it together. But certainly I wanted to credit him because without him, I wouldn't have had the words, because it's actually written from his perspective, using the actual words and the actual questions he asked. And, so many people told me, oh, he's too young to understand, he'll just forget, and that's not the case. And I worked that out very, very quickly, because here was my 3-year-old. And, obviously I had to fill him in on what had happened and the fact that Daddy couldn't come back. Yeah. So I initiated the first conversation, but everything after that, I just replied to his questions, and he asked things like, how many more sleeps until Christmas? And I'm going, oh, I don't know, 167. And he looks me straight in the eye and he goes, and how many more sleeps until I have to die, Mummy? And, there's people going, oh, they're too small, they don't understand, and they do. Yeah. And luckily I had a child who was inquisitive and who was brave enough to ask those things. And I figured if he had those questions, then other 3-year-old and 4-year-old and 5-year-olds would have those questions. So I wrote them down, and that's how the book started. That's how everything started. I remember kind of saying to my mum, oh, I'm going to write a children's book about death, and she goes, nice. And yeah, there we go. I did. And, it's not a bestseller, but luckily, because, I don't want people to have to need our book. But when they do, I know it's a really good resource from the, certainly from the feedback I've had. And obviously it's been out for a while now. So no, it's good. It's not the most comfortable of subjects, I guess. But, children are bereaved all the time and they need help, and it's really interesting to hear you say, if only you'd had help, because you are talking not just from the perspective of an author, but also from someone who's been through it, who's experienced a close death in the family. And, that's really helpful and insightful for me as well.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. So I've had issues with my mental health all the way through adulthood, and I've actually had a couple of breakdowns, and I have a therapist that I go and see, and after the last one, she actually tapped right back to when my brother died. And because when it happened, everything just carried on. And a couple of months after, my maternal grandfather got sick, so my mum was looking after him. My sister was 6 years older and she was off at college, and she went away that summer, and my dad was back at work. And so it was just kind of me not knowing how to deal with it. So I didn't deal with it. I didn't cry because I'd once cried in front of mum, which had made her sad. I felt that was my fault. Obviously it wasn't, but I then didn't cry. And I still, if I sit and watch a film with mum and dad and it's a bit sad, I still hold it in. I still haven't managed to get past that. And so it caused a lot of problems for me as I went through life and not dealing with my emotions properly. Touch wood, since we went back and did that, and my therapist got me to acknowledge any time I was upset that was connected to my brother. And I almost grieved for him nearly 30 years after he died. And I've been so much better. It's been amazing. The difference is amazing. But interestingly, when you said about telling your mum that you were going to write the book, when I first said to my husband that I wanted to do a book about bereavement, he went, there surely isn't really a need for it. I think there probably is. He was in his early 20s when he first lost somebody close to him. So for him, he'd never had anything as a child like that. So it didn't fit in his mind that that would be something that was necessary. So it was quite interesting persuading him. So that was when I started Googling statistics and how many children do lose somebody. And at that point he went, oh, okay. Yeah. So I
think it's something like 1 in every primary school class is bereaved of a parent or a sibling. I mean, so your child goes to school, one of those children has been bereaved of a significant person.
Yeah, it's frightening.
Yeah.
I think the other one oh, sorry, go on.
No, on you go.
The other one that always stands out to me is how many young offenders have had a bereavement as a child. And I found a lady up in Glasgow recently. She's a research fellow and she looks into this quite heavily, because the statistic that gets shared is that 40% of young offenders have had a bereavement. Now, the research that she's done indicates that that figure is actually much, much higher. And quite often they've had, I think it's an average of 4 or 5, something like that, before they turn 18. And because they are, a lot of them are male, we shouldn't probably do that, but they put on a front, so they don't then deal with it, and they can end up getting into so much trouble. And I think just simple interventions like your book or my book or any of the books that are available, or just having the right person at school to speak to, or opening up the conversation about death, because I think it still is so taboo. And like you say, it's not a nice subject, but it's one that really needs to be opened up more, I think.
Yeah, I agree, and the same with serious illness, and I think what you mentioned earlier there, that, you once cried in front of your mother and you felt like you'd upset her, you felt like you'd caused that. This is where I always say, look, it's so important for us as adults to teach our children to deal with our emotions, and we can't do that by telling them how to grieve and how to be sad and how to be honest. We can only teach them that by being sad and crying in front of them and crying with them and acknowledging that hurt and saying, sometimes things aren't fair and I can't fix it and I'm really sorry, and yes, I do feel upset and I'm crying because your daddy died and I feel upset, and that's okay, because that's the only way they learn. They learn by watching how you deal with all of this. And obviously, as a parent, we want to protect our children. I'm 1,000,000% for that, but what I believe is that we can only protect them with the best version of the truth. They're just trying to understand. If I say to you someone died, or the word death, immediately what it means. If I say it to a 3-year-old child, they don't know, they've never come across that word, they don't know the meaning of the word, they don't know eternity, they don't even understand those emotions, they didn't even know that there is such a thing as death.
No.
So it's our job as adults to help them understand and put those pieces of the puzzle together to enable them to deal with those things, you know, in an emotionally positive way, you know, which might be crying and upsetting and screaming and shouting and all those things. But yeah, so they then have an output, and they don't go on to channel that anger into, you know, less good places. And I think that's really important to remember, that we do protect our children, even if we bring out strong emotions in them. And it's not comfortable to sit with that. And it's not comfortable to not be able to fix it. It's not nice,
I know, it's
but
horrible.
it's important.
Yeah.
It is, but it's important, you know. And my kids are now 13 and 16. And, you know, I promised them I'd always be honest, and I promised they could always ask me any questions. And, you know, they do. And it's lovely. And we've had many, many grown-up conversations, not just about death, but about everything. And it's such an honor that they have the courage to come and speak to me. But you lay those foundations early on, you know, again, which is why I think it's just so important to do talk and to do acknowledge, you know, yes, I feel upset.
Yeah.
You know, something bad's happened. I can't fix it.
No.
Because we can't fix everything.
No. And it's so sad. As a parent, that's all you want to do, isn't it? So with your new book, obviously you went through your own illness to get there. How were the children? I mean, are you happy to talk about that? I don't want to.
Yeah, of course. Oh God, no, of course. So yeah, so I was 34 when my husband died as well. And like I mentioned, my kids were 11 months and 3. And not quite 3 years later, I got a diagnosis of breast cancer when my kids were 3 and 6. So that was really difficult because, you know, I remember Alex asking in the early days after Martin's death, you know, who's going to look after me when you die, mummy? And, you know, I was like, in my head, I'm going, oh, that's never going to happen. You know, I'm thinking bad luck doesn't strike twice. But, you know, as it turned out, all of a sudden I was faced with my own mortality. It was like, right here, this could actually happen. I could actually die and have to leave my children, which obviously is every parent's worst nightmare. So I had quite an aggressive tumor. I was told by some amazing doctor who I knew couldn't promise, but he told me that I wasn't going to die from my cancer, and I knew he couldn't promise. I knew there were no guarantees, but I had that little morsel. So when my kids said, "Are you going to die, mummy?" I said, honestly, it's a possibility, but they've told me that there's lots of treatment and that I'm going to get better. But, you know, I didn't say, no, I'm definitely not going to die, because I knew that I couldn't say that. So, yeah, that was difficult. So I had to go through 4.5 months of chemotherapy. I had surgery, I had radiotherapy, and I'm still on hormone treatment now. You know, that was 9 years ago. So you're on tamoxifen for 10 years. And I was on Zoladex, which is a sort of 4-weekly injection into the belly to stop the estrogen. But they can only do that for 5 years. But again, all the way through, I've had open and honest conversations with my children. And, you know, I always stress it has to be age appropriate. It has to be in words they understand. You have to understand that children think very literally. And, you know, I also have a number of stepdaughters. I have 5 stepdaughters, so we'll have 7 kids altogether. So obviously I had different conversations with the older ones than I had with the little ones. But, you know, just find the best version of the truth. I think that's my best advice.
Yeah, I do love how you've written this. I mean, I love all of your work, and I think you just, it comes across so easily. And I think to sit and read that with a child who, you know, if a parent or anybody is going through what you've been through and explaining it in the way that you have in here, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
And I just think it's to go through what you went through when your husband died, to then have to go through that. I just think the resilience and how your children have come through it is just amazing. Do they, oh, not the little one, but does Alex remember his daddy? with it being when he was
Alex does, yeah.
Was he?
Alex does, and you know, we talk about him a lot, and we always have. You know,
Yeah.
Martin has always been part of our family. I'm remarried now, and they call both of my children call my new husband Dad, but you know, Martin was Daddy and
Yeah.
John is Dad, so that distinction is really important for them. But yeah, Alex, yeah, you know, they miss him for different reasons. Alex, well, for the same reason, but Olivia sort of misses him because she has no recollection of him whatsoever.
Yeah.
You know, I asked her, do you remember anything? Do you remember the sound of his voice? Do you remember a touch? And she just looked at me and she just went, no. And it's just heartbreaking, you know, not just for me, but for her and for him. You know, he deserved to be remembered, but an 11-month-old child obviously can't. But yeah, Alex remembers him, and not just does he remember him, he remembers that day, because Alex also unfortunately was the only person with Martin when it happened, when he, you know, he was taken critically ill. He had a heart attack because they'd gone away on a father-son weekend for some special bonding time. And yeah, he remembers every single second of that day. So, you know, kids don't forget.
That is incredible,
they do remember, and they do need to talk about it. And you know, for a long time he still blamed himself, even though from the very start I said, look, Alex, you've done amazing, because Alex actually went out and got help. He found somebody else who phoned an ambulance, and the ambulance got there. Martin still walked, aided by 2 paramedics, but he managed to still walk into the ambulance, and it was there that he had a sort of second fatal heart attack out of sight of Alex. But he died at the scene, basically. He never made it to hospital alive. And even though I'd always said, you know, Alex, you've done amazing, I'm so proud of you, you know, you did all the right things, even years later when he was about 8 or 9, you know, you'd start crying all of a sudden, and you know, I was like, what's the matter? And you know, he kind of looks at me and he goes, Mum, I just wish I'd been a bit older, and then I could have run a bit faster, and then maybe the ambulance would have got there sooner, and then maybe Daddy would still be alive. And you know, I sat with him and I explained that, you know, I spoke to everybody. I spoke to the paramedics, I spoke to the pathologist, I spoke to the people in the hospital, the consultant, and they all agreed that Daddy's heart attack was so catastrophic, he would have died even if he'd had the heart attack in the hospital. But the only reason I know that is because you were there and managed to get an ambulance.
Yeah.
And I thought that would make him feel better. But you know, again, I underestimated him, because he just looked at me and quietly just said, Mummy, if I'd known he was going to die anyway, I wouldn't have bothered running. I would have just sat with him and told him I loved him. And, you know, again, I know that level of understanding and that level of compassion, you know, we need to give our children more credit. We really do. And again, you know, I'm so grateful that my kids have the courage to say these things. And I don't know, you know, I guess if you haven't had that sort of experience, either as a bereaved child yourself, or, you know, as a parent or working with bereaved children, you know, you will just think they get over it. And or maybe you just think, you know, they'll grieve all the time, but you know, they don't. We often say, you know, child grief is like jumping in and out of puddles, because, you know, for weeks you're looking at them and you're going, why are they not even upset? They're not even sad, because they're just playing along. And then all of a sudden something triggers something, and it's like the end of the world, and you're like, whoa, you know, I can't deal with this either. I don't know how to do this. And I think the secret is just, if you can stop what you're doing, be with your child, be present.
Yeah.
And say, I'm really sorry that happened. It is really, really rubbish. You're right. You've got every right to be upset. You've got every right to be angry.
Yeah.
But I can't fix it. And we just need to make the best with what we've got.
Yeah.
And that's all you can do.
Yeah. And as you say, you know, showing your own emotions, because they look to us as adults as to how to deal with situations. And so, you know, like, if you hold in all your emotions, they'll do exactly the same. And then obviously you're not dealing with it, and it's not coming out, and they're not grieving properly. And I think that's when all the troubles start. And I think just open honesty and being direct. I love the way that you clearly spoke to them when they asked the questions, because it's in the book of, you know, and
yeah.
it was just perfect. Just the explanation at their level was just absolutely perfect. And I think anyone who's got little ones who was going through something like this should definitely pick up your book, because it was just fabulous. And I think just so emotional as well. You got me a few minutes ago, and I just think for Alex and what he went through and being there, and to still feel it all those years later and feel that guilt. And I think it's so precious that he was able to talk to you, because maybe that's one of the things that some children will hold on to and not voice, that would then stay with them forever. And I think it's just important to be open with children so they know that they can talk about it.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I kind of call my concept little people, big conversations, because, you know, they are little people, you know, and they're not kids who don't understand. They're not a different species. You just need to speak differently with them. And yeah, they have the right to know. And I think, you know, kids pick up on when something's wrong anyway. And what happens if you don't show your emotions, you know, you hide them with the best intentions most of the time, because you know, like I say, your instinct is to protect your kids. So you think, if I take my grief behind this closed door, they won't know that something bad's happened, but they do. They pick up on it. And just like you said, you felt like it was your fault that you made your mother cry. You know, if she'd come out and said, look, you've done nothing wrong, I just feel really, really upset because your brother died, then you could have had a huge big hug. And, you know, you can't fix the world, but you can put it to rights, and you can say, you know, what I'm feeling is valid, you know, and I'm okay to voice that. And, you know, I can help my mum, and my mum can help me. And, you know, that's what we did. And I didn't do everything perfectly either, not all of the time, you know. I tried, just like everybody tries, but you know, the fact that my 13-year-old daughter still gives me a hug every day and tells me she loves me, it's just, you know, it's so precious. And it, you know, it tells me that I haven't messed up completely, you know. And they helped me when they were little too, not just by being there and, you know, making me get out of bed, but, you know, just by saying things like, oh, why are you crying? And, you know, and I would just say, look, I feel really upset because Daddy died. And they were like, oh yeah, that's nice, you know, I'm off to play. But they still give me a cuddle, you know. And that's good. So yeah, I think it's a fine balance, because obviously you don't want to overwhelm your children, and, you know, they shouldn't be your carer either. It's not their responsibility. They're, you know, their job is to be your kids. But that doesn't mean you have to hide everything from them, because they also need help to understand not just how the world works and that bad things happen, but also, you know, kindness is a good thing, being open is a good thing, dealing with your emotions is a good thing, and acknowledging that everybody has, you know, mixed emotions over a lot of stuff, and that's okay. You know, you're not weird for feeling that, you're not horrible for feeling that. But yeah, also, you know, I always say it's okay to feel sad, but it's also okay to feel happy. You know, there was this huge big chunk of time where Alex really, really struggled to laugh, or to be happy, or even content, or even feel something positive for his stepdad, because, you know, he just felt like, I think he actually said to me, I think Daddy would be really upset that I was happy because he died. And obviously, you know, you and I, any adult would see that the child's not happy because their father died. You know, the child is happy despite their father's death, and that's a good thing. But for him to make that connection, again, you know, soul destroying, but so grateful he said it out loud, and then we could deal with it.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think that's also the confusing thing for children, because it's almost like they expect to be sad, and people will say to them, oh, your grandpa's died, you must be very sad, you know. So then they feel that they should be very sad, but they are living their life, and they are going to school, and they're out with their friends, and they're doing whatever they're doing. And so it's almost really confusing because they're feeling happy, but the conflict is that then they're not supposed to be, and then they feel guilty, and then they feel all these different emotions, and they might feel angry about what's happened, and so within a space of 5 minutes they can go through a full range of emotions and just not have a clue what's going on. And so they then revert back to what they feel should be right in that situation. And I think explaining to children that they can feel happy and that they can ask questions. I think this is the biggest thing. I've got it in my book that I wrote about bereavement, because I never asked any questions, and I did feel guilty when I was out having fun. And I think, had I have known that actually you don't have to be miserable. Yes, you can have your moments, but life does move on and things are normal, but you're missing that person. And I think it's really important that they can understand that. I think, yeah, it's a big part of it for me that they know this. So I've just written a book for teenagers, because people had been asking me for such a long time about whether I had anything for teenagers, and I was always a little bit frightened of writing anything for teens. But my son's nearly 15, so he read every edit, checked every word, took a few words out that he said, nobody says that anymore, Mum.
Yeah. Brilliant.
But within that, it's the same message, but just written quite differently. It's all about understanding that you can be happy and ask questions and carry on with life in the way that you want to, carefully. And I think it's just such an important message to get out there, to get families talking and being open with each other.
Yeah, I agree. And, I mean, it's not about moving on and leaving that person behind, it's just about keeping moving, because you can't go back, you can't fix it. And, I listened to a really interesting TED Talk by Dr. Jeff Warburton. And, he said the best way, or something to that extent, the best way to honor the dead is to live well. And that really helped me, because, obviously I'm not going to lie, I struggled with feelings of guilt for being so happy again as well. It just happens, you can't help it. But what he said there, the best way to honor the dead is to live well, that really, really helped me. And also to understand that you can't go back to normal, because normal is gone. Like your normal as you knew it and your future as you planned it, that doesn't exist anymore. And I was frightened to move pictures and to paint walls, because to me it felt like erasing my husband. But that's just what you do, because you freshen up your room, and things change and your taste change, and that's what you naturally do. And it's it's really suffocating to be stuck in that bit where you think, I can't make any changes, because it would feel like I don't love him anymore. And that's not true. And we carry him in our hearts, and we've got a little bit of his ashes, and that comes with us, and we carry him in our conversations. And I still see like his favorite chocolate bar, and I'll tell the kids, oh, Daddy's favorite chocolate bar, and oh, I found him hiding chocolate in his sock drawer and stuff. So there's always little funny stories that I try to mix into conversations. Not try, they just happen naturally, and that's a good thing, and that's nice. And remember him, and in a nice way. We still get upset sometimes, sometimes very upset. Sometimes you don't know what triggers it. In fact, most of the time you don't know what triggers it. But you've just got to sit with it and go, yeah, that's how I feel right now, and that's okay. It just means you care, and you're human, and you loved someone who can no longer be here.
That's so true. I love those words. That was really lovely. Do you plan on writing any more? I know you write from your experiences, but do you think you'll write anything else in future?
I have actually written another book about breast cancer. So this book about breast cancer, Is It Still Okay to Have Cuddles, is written from Olivia's point of view. She was 3. It's our story. explains treatment and mummy gets better. But I felt really strongly that if I write a book where mummy gets better, I also need to write one where mummy dies. And that book is written, but it's not yet illustrated. So that's kind of sitting in the woodworks. I've got lots of thoughts in my head, but nothing else is on paper as yet. But I've got a feeling there might be more.
Yeah, I sit there and start going, oh, maybe I could do this and maybe I could do that, but I don't have time to sit and write anything, so I just keep having the ideas, and maybe one day.
I think the thing is, I always say it felt like the books found me, and I think if an idea is strong enough, you'll pay attention, as you have done with your books, and I think if another idea like that comes along, you will have time, you will make the time, and you will make that book happen.
Look out. I might go and sit in my armchair.
Yeah, my husband keeps saying, what about writing a nicer book? And I'm like, well, there's so many authors who write really good, really nice books. I'm kind of like in that niche of that thing that nobody wants to talk about. So
yeah, I seem to be down that road as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's good. And, I think children deserve voices, and children deserve to be seen as individuals, as people, as humans, as they just need our help to understand.
Definitely. It spurs you on. I think I've met a couple of the kids who've read my bereavement book, and their absolute honest feedback on how it helped them is every time I feel like throwing the towel in, because the costs have gone up and I can't afford it anymore, and I can't keep plodding on, and I get all a bit upset and go, I can't do it anymore. And then I hear this little boy's voice telling me how wonderful it was to read the book, and I go, no, I've got to carry on. I've got to keep going.
I hear you. I have the same thing, the feedback I get, not just from parents, but sometimes some children. I had this little 8-year-old boy send me an email just saying, oh, thank you, someone showed me your book and I ran home and asked mummy to order it, and when it came, we sat on the sofa and read it together. I just melt. It's like, it's honestly, but yeah, that you are right, that is the reason why we do it.
You just have to keep remembering, and we know that it's helping, and I know that I've already helped children, and you have, that little boy and all the other people who've read your book, and that's good. That's what we're here for, and that's what we're doing, and it makes me very proud. Not very good at saying that, but yeah, I'm very proud.
No, you should be. No, it's a great thing to do, and we need more people who give voices to small children. Definitely.
Right, I'm going to wrap that up there.
That sounds perfect. Thank you so much for.
Thank you. That's my first really ever organising a chat. So I hope it does come across well.
You're a natural.
I don't know about that.
In your career.
Oh no, definitely not. But it was lovely to chat to you.